Hi everyone, Jennifer Blevins-Smith with Integral Clinic Solutions, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Navigating the Business of Medicine. Today I want to talk about mid-year financial cleanup. When I talk about mid-year financial cleanup, I specifically want to discuss your accounts receivable and your collections. We're halfway through the year, but have you done any check to make sure that your cash flow is on track for the first 6 months of the year? We've officially closed out through 7 months. So you should be able to look at data at least through the first 6 months of the year and be able to extrapolate information that we are going to discuss today. The first step is you want to pull all of your aging accounts receivable. This should be in a report that your practice management system provides, and you should be able to find it easily, honestly. And you want to show everything that's outstanding that is owed to your practice or not processed by insurance or by patient payments in different buckets. Your 0 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 120, and then 120 plus is usually how I like to look at it. You shouldn't have to worry too much about stuff that is newer than 60 days old. So 60 days and less, hopefully that's the bulk of your AR. That's the goal, is the bulk of your outstanding owed to you by patients and insurances should be in the 0 to 30 and 30 to 60 buckets. However, you're still going to have some aging out there that's 60 plus. And that's where you really need to focus, in my opinion, at this point in the year to try to get it cleaned up. It gives you enough time now to try to get that all taken care of so that the end of the year you can focus on what's left there and it's just more manageable. The 60 to 90 bucket is kind of a gray area for a lot of people, and people might handle it a little bit differently. It's still kind of in the safe zone, but if you were going to do a color grid of green, yellow, red, where green is good, yellow is cautionary, red is bad, it's in that yellow zone, that 60 to 90, because it could go bad really fast, or it could get paid and come out completely and be considered more green, I guess, in that respect. But anything, in my opinion, that's halfway in that 60 to 90 bucket, so 75 to 90, is probably going to drop into your 90 plus pretty soon. And that is where you really need to focus your efforts and your micro and dissecting and looking at to figure out what's going on. Payers will often deny or close claims in that 90 to 120 day range. So it depends on their timely filing limits and things like that. Hopefully, all of this is stuff that has already been submitted. It's not claims waiting to be submitted. That's a whole nother topic. When I'm talking about AR in this regard is specifically things that have been submitted that you're waiting for a response from the insurance or you're waiting for payment from the patient. And I do encourage you bifurcating the total AR. So first run the report to see what your total AR is overall for the practice in those buckets, but then separating between what's patient responsibility, what's insurance responsibility, because that is going to help you do that micro analysis on each to figure out where there are issues or how to handle each of those. You can choose how you want to run your AR for the insurance. You could run it in buckets and just see the overall. You could have it also grouped by payer, which is what I do, because that's how I can try to identify if there's something specific going on with one insurance. And then also by provider. So I can see, oh, this provider has a lot of outstanding, but we don't for other providers. I wonder if there's a credentialing issue or something like that. It helps you kind of see where you might need to dig a little bit deeper, because it can be a little overwhelming at first, especially if you've never done this before or you haven't done it very often. I'm a big proponent of using Excel. I love to run reports in Excel. I'm not very good at Excel. I know how to do the basics, but I can run pivot tables. I can do some groupings and calculations and things like that. I encourage you to put things in Excel if you can, especially with financial forms, because it does help you. It has so many capabilities, and there are so many YouTube videos and free courses out there to learn Excel better, that if this is something you're going to be using often, I encourage you to watch those as well. So when you break the AR down and you're looking at the insurances, you want to see who are your top 5 payers that you are owed money from or that need to process your claims, okay? And then you need to ask yourself, why could these payers be doing this? It's a very good question. The first thing you can do to help save time is check on the payer portals to see if they have any general communication to people saying that they know they're delayed in processing, because that does happen. You can call if you don't get information through the portal. That's very helpful. And talk to a customer service representative with some of those aging claim examples and say, look, I have all these claims. Here are some examples, what's going on, and get some more information from them. A lot of times it's on their end, I'm not gonna lie, but there are a lot of times where the practice, something is going wrong, or you're under an audit, or they're waiting for medical records and your team isn't doing it fast enough, or something like that. It is worth drilling down and finding out so you can go to the root cause and fix it. And hopefully you can find the root cause to prevent it for next time, for the second half of the year, right? That is the goal, is to be proactive. I would also personally look at the claims that have paid by that payer during the first 6 months, just to make sure you're not getting underpaid. You don't have a large amount of denials, right? Because this isn't going to look at your denials. This is looking at stuff that's still outstanding that hasn't processed yet. So I'd be running a denials report by payer to see if there's an issue there. And so there's a delay, and then they're just ending up denying once they process anyway. And then that's opening a whole nother can of worms, right? Making sure you're getting the payments and processing that you should. It's one of those things that one little investigation leads to another, and you want to check and make sure everything is okay. If you do notice a large amount of denials, why are they denying? Then you have to jump in and go into that, and that's a whole nother video I could do. But it should lead you down another track that you're going to investigate further, because if you're getting a delay in processing and they're just denying, you need to figure out why this is all happening. And if you are noticing it's a trend, and maybe it's an ongoing trend, you need to communicate with your representative at the insurance company to figure out if you've been flagged for some reason, if you're in some kind of program audit that you're not aware of, or something like that, so that you can put workflows and things into place to hopefully mitigate as much of this as possible. When it comes to the patient AR, seeing if you have large amounts outstanding in your longer, older buckets is something that makes you come internally to look and make sure our statements going out to patients regularly. Is your front office asking to collect outstanding balances when patients are on the phone or they're checking in for appointments? Are patients utilizing or aware of that they can utilize ways to make payments to you, maybe through text messages, portals, something like that? Or are you utilizing all the technology that you could be to help patients pay easier? This is something that is really important to reflect on your internal processes, the training of your staff, making sure that your patients know you have expectations for them to pay their bills. That's a big thing. But this is something that you also need to have a reality check and go, okay, patients aren't paying their bills. I have a really high patient balance over 120 days. What is that balance of? Well, they're mostly copays. Well, that goes back to my training of my front office, and they're not collecting copays at the time of service. That's a major issue. Why? Do they not know they have a copay because nobody's loading it in there? They're not paying attention to the eligibility and benefits screen. They're scared to ask and have a financial conversation. There could be multiple reasons, but you just have to keep asking why and drilling down until you can come to an area where you can find a solution. If you notice it's because it's a lot of balance from deductible season. Okay, well, maybe next year for deductible season, we need to start collecting deposits towards patients' visits if they're having a high level cost procedure or service offered, right? Or we need to communicate to patients better that we expect payment within a certain amount of time. Do you use an external collection agency? Maybe it's time to sign up and start sending patients to collections if you haven't yet. I know a lot of providers don't like to do that. However, it is still a business and it's something to consider. Holding on to a high balance patient AR is not healthy for the practice, for the business. It sets bad examples for your patients and a precedence that is not healthy. But these are things that need to be looked at when you're looking at your patient aging AR. Ongoing, there's going to be some metrics that you really should be tracking, and hopefully you're doing it already, but you should be looking at your net collection rate overall for your business. It really should be 95% or higher of your collectible revenue. That is a great target to try to hit. Your days in AR on average should be less than 40 days. Honestly, I know that's kind of more or less industry standard. I would say less than 30 days personally, if you can. Obviously, your specialty, your volume, all of that is going to play a little bit of a factor. Again, it's a goal. You need to monitor your gross collection rates and trends over time to see what's going on and try to nip things in the bud sooner rather than later. And your total patient balances percentage, if it's increasing, you should be concerned. Your overall patient balance and AR should be decreasing or staying at a lower percentage, like it's not climbing. It should be consistent. And then you know that your internal patient collection system is working. But if it's increasing and it's increasing consistently or drastically, you have an issue that you need to dive into sooner than later and find a better solution. Hopefully your billing team or your billing vendor can provide you with this information regularly. These are key performance indicators that should be monitored on an ongoing basis. And then, every quarter or half a year, depending on your volume, you do this deep dive into your aging and collections. But you should be able to run reports, have some kind of analytics dashboard even. Your system could have that already available to you and you're not aware, but that you can just do like periodic check-ins where it doesn't require you to run this full report and do this whole analysis, but you can just kind of keep a finger on the pulse to make sure it's still doing okay. So definitely find out about that if you're not aware of any analytics dashboard, or if you're using a third-party vendor, ask them to provide you with certain information on whatever cadence you prefer, but definitely ask if you don't know. If you're using a vendor, ask them how often they follow up on claims if they haven't heard back, right? If you have your own staff in-house, ask them, how often do you follow up on claims? How do you identify claims that need to be followed up on? If there's anything in appeals, how often do you follow up on those? How do you know when things need to be appealed? How do you find out if things need documentation sent to the insurance if they're holding a claim because they're waiting on medical records? How do you identify that? In United Healthcare, they're sending it through the portal called Track It or something, I think is what it's called, where they send notification to the practice in the portal saying, we have this claim, we need these medical records for these services, and you can send it through their portal. Other insurances are adopting the same practice, but find out specifically about yours. Make sure you create a workflow for your aging claims specifically. So not only just after doing this analysis and trying to figure out how you're going to focus on working the old stuff, you should have an ongoing workflow of a specific person, perhaps even focusing on working claims, and their only job is if the claim is older than 45 days old, right? From the claim date, the submission date, find out and have somebody specifically responsible for working your old AR. You might have staff that are better at doing that than doing the more recent stuff, or vice versa. If you hire a vendor, again, ask them what their process is and who is responsible for working that, or how they identify and work that. Determine how you want things prioritized, not only by how old things are, but do you want your staff or your vendor to focus on the high dollar claims first? Do you want them to focus on the oldest claims first? Depending on your specialty and cash flow and things like that, it might be different from clinic to clinic or practice to practice. So you need to be able to know what you want and communicate that to whoever is responsible so that they can fulfill your requested workflow and process on that. Have a housekeeping or cleanup policy. If there are patient balances in your AR that are less than $10 because of the cost of contacting patients with staff time and stamps and paper and blah, 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 blah that goes into it, you lose money every time you send another statement to patients at a certain point, and then the staff time on top of it. So get to a threshold where you're like, you know what, if a lot of this AR at this point in the first 6 months of the year is less than $10, we're just gonna adjust it off as bad debt. House cleaning, keep it up. Do it every so often. Some practices go, I want to do it once a year. I don't want to do it twice a year. Fine, whatever. But put in some kind of process and follow through on it consistently just to clean up all of that old stuff, and dedicate it with a certain adjustment code so that you can identify it and try to collect it from patients. Maybe even put like some kind of message in their chart that says adjusted off $5.88 from a January 2025 visit. Please try to collect it next visit. So if they pay that $5.88 at their next visit, you can reverse the adjustment, post the payment, and you got money, right? You can always send final statements or some kind of final communication, asking patients to pay if they have a delinquent account. Again, it depends on your return on investment of how much it costs to do that. You would have to weigh that out internally. If you have any automations in your system that can alert you if a claim is stuck in a specific status for a certain amount of time, that it alerts you or moves to a certain queue or bucket to notify someone who's responsible for working it, definitely look into that. Check into your system, ask your vendors, find out if there's any automation that can help you work AR, identify AR as much as possible to keep it less manual. There's going to be enough manual processes involved in this already. So anything that you can identify that can be automated is only going to benefit you and your staff. They will be grateful, I promise you. Once you identify all of this and you put workflows and you identify areas where there's gaps or needs improvement, try to maintain this as much as possible to avoid having to reinvent the wheel next time. Hopefully you can learn from it. You'll run regular reports on a regular cadence or be given the information that you asked for, like we discussed. You can break it down into smarter, smaller segments to help you once you kind of get the hang of it. You can act on denials and stuck claims a lot faster. You can automate anything where possible. And then you can set realistic goals for yourself, for your staff, for your vendors when all of this comes into play. And it just keeps it easier to track and maintain for you as an office manager or owner, as well as for the staff involved. If you have any questions or comments about this, please leave that in the comments below. I will do my best to try to answer you. Smash the thumbs up button if today's video was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and please share this with your colleagues whom you feel would benefit from the content. If you have any colleagues that are struggling or are new to opening or operating their own practice, please share my channel with them. I appreciate the support, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.